At 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, Sarah had everything: a brand new corner office, a six-figure salary, and a meticulously crafted digital identity that screamed corporate success. By 9:15 a.m., her LinkedIn profile didn't exist. Her Instagram was completely wiped. 5 years of emails, project files, and digital records proving she even worked at the company? Gone. She hadn't just lost a few passwords. I systematically unraveled the very identity she used to claw her way to the top, leaving almost no trace she was ever there. Before the deleted accounts, before the ghosted network, and before Sarah stood shaking in the middle of the open plan office because the security gates wouldn't even recognize her keycard, there was the betrayal, the kind of calculated, cold-blooded career sabotage that HR completely turns a blind eye to. So she played the corporate game flawlessly, using my data, my late-night sacrifices, and my exclusive client relationships to secure the exact director role I had been promised for over a year. She smiled, looked me dead in the eye, and stole the promotion I spent 3 years bleeding for. She thought because I was quiet, I was weak. She thought because I shook her hand and congratulated her, I had accepted defeat. She completely underestimated the fact that in the modern corporate world, your entire professional existence is tied to a digital thread, and I knew exactly how to cut it. What you are about to hear is not a standard story about office drama or a toxic coworker getting a slap on the wrist. It is a detailed breakdown of how easily a person's life can be dismantled when the wrong person is pushed past their breaking point. You might think I crossed the line, but by the time I reveal exactly what she did to me and the terrifyingly simple way I made her disappear, you will be asking yourself if I went far enough. To understand how I dismantled Sarah's life, you first need to understand the architecture of a stolen career. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, methodical bleed. For 3 years, I was the backbone of our division. I was the senior data strategist, but that title was a joke compared to what I actually did. I was the one pulling 70-hour weeks, missing family birthdays, and surviving on stale break room coffee to build a predictive analytics model that brought in 3 of the firm's largest enterprise clients. My manager, David, knew it. The partners knew it. And a year prior, during my annual review, David slid a piece of paper across his desk. It was an informal roadmap to the Director of Strategy position. The mandate was clear: finalize the integration of our new flagship client and the corner office. The 6-figure bump and the equity share were mine. I had the promise. I had the proof. All I had to do was cross the finish line. Enter Sarah. She was hired externally as a project liaison, a made-up corporate title that essentially meant her job was to facilitate communication between my team and the executives. Sarah didn't know how to code. She couldn't run a SQL query if her life depended on it, and she certainly didn't understand the complex algorithmic models I was building. But she had a master's degree in office politics. She was charismatic, impeccably dressed, and possessed a terrifyingly sharp intuition for finding the most powerful person in a room and mirroring their exact opinions. At first, she was just an annoyance. She would schedule sync-up meetings that wasted my time, asking me to explain my data to her like she was a 5-year-old. I willingly handed over my reports, my insights, and my projections, assuming we were on the same team. I was naive. I believed in the greatest lie corporate America ever sold us, the myth of a meritocracy. I thought that if I kept my head down, did the heavy lifting, and produced undeniable results, the system would reward me. You've probably felt that same frustration. You watch the smooth talkers, the networkers, the ones who leave exactly at 5 p.m. to go to happy hour with the bosses, seamlessly gliding up the corporate ladder while you're left carrying the weight of their incompetence. You convince yourself that the work speaks for itself. It doesn't. In the modern workplace, the work is completely mute. The person holding the microphone gets all the credit. Sarah took my microphone. It started with subtle things. She would take my raw data, format it into a sleek PowerPoint, and present it to the board using words like my strategy and my vision. Whenever a partner praised the results, She would smile gracefully and say, "Thank you. It took a lot of late nights to conceptualize this." She CC'd the right executives on emails where she appeared to be delegating tasks to me, tasks I had already completed. She created a narrative where I was merely the mechanic, and she was the visionary architect. The breaking point came in October. I had spent 6 consecutive weekends finalizing the flagship client integration, the exact deliverable tied to my promotion. The night before the final presentation, I was at the hospital. My father had suffered a severe stroke. I emailed the final encrypted files to Sarah so she could hold them until I arrived the next morning, but I never made it to the presentation. I spent the next 48 hours in the ICU. When I finally returned to the office, exhausted and grieving, the atmosphere had shifted. There was a company-wide email in my inbox. Subject: announcing our new director of strategy. It was Sarah. While I was sitting in a hospital waiting room, Sarah had walked into that boardroom, presented my entire 3-year project, and explicitly told the partners that I had struggled to keep up with the technical demands, forcing her to step in and save the integration at the 11th hour. She leveraged my absence, weaponized my personal family tragedy, and stole the promotion right out of my hands. When I confronted David, he wouldn't even look me in the eye. "Sarah just has the executive presence we need right now," he mumbled. "You're too valuable in the trenches." I walked out of his office feeling a kind of cold, hollow rage that defies description. I went to my desk, sat down, and watched Sarah holding court in her new corner office through the glass walls. She caught my eye, gave me a sympathetic, condescending little wave, and took a sip from her coffee. She thought she had won. She thought the game was over. But here is the terrifying reality about people who build their entire success on the backs of others. They don't actually understand the foundation they are standing on. Sarah spent months stealing my data, my presentations, and my client relationships. But she completely forgot who built the firm's entire network infrastructure from scratch. She forgot that before I was a data strategist, I was the lead systems administrator. I didn't just have the passwords. I possessed the root access to her entire digital existence. And I wasn't going to report her to HR. I was going to delete her. I didn't just lock her out of her computer. That's amateur. If you lock someone out, IT simply resets the password and you're caught. I needed something far more insidious. I needed her to look dangerously incompetent. I started with the Exchange server. Since I built the mail routing rules for the entire building, I created a silent script attached exclusively to Sarah's user ID. Every time she emailed a partner or a top-tier client, the script delayed the delivery, not by a week, just by 12 hours. She would send a critical, time-sensitive end-of-day report at 4:55 p.m. The executives wouldn't receive it until 4:55 a.m. the next day. To the board, Sarah was consistently missing crucial deadlines. To Sarah, the executives were suddenly ignoring her emails. Within 2 weeks, David stopped stopping by her office. Her fast-track reputation was quietly rotting from the inside. But delayed emails wouldn't get her fired. I needed to isolate her completely. Sarah didn't know how to pull her own analytics. She relied entirely on the automated data dashboards I had built. So I subtly altered the permissions on her specific dashboard view. I didn't break it. I just randomized the data output by a margin of exactly 4%. 4% is invisible to the naked eye. But in predictive analytics for enterprise clients, 4% represents millions of dollars in miscalculated risk. During her first major solo pitch as director, she stood in front of the board and confidently presented a massive strategy based entirely on corrupted numbers. The flagship client's CFO, a guy who breathed math, noticed the discrepancy immediately. He tore her apart right there in the boardroom. She stuttered. She tried to blame the system. She tried to throw me under the bus. But the server logs, the ones I had already carefully doctored, showed she had manually inputted the erroneous variables herself. She lost the room entirely. But internal humiliation was only the first phase. Now it was time to strip her of her public identity. Sarah lived on LinkedIn. She posted daily thought leadership articles that were actually just my old memos run through a thesaurus. She had over 20,000 followers. It was her digital safety net, her proof of industry importance. I couldn't just guess her password. But I didn't have to. Sarah was fundamentally lazy. She used her corporate email as the primary recovery address for every single account she owned. I intercepted a password reset request at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. I routed it to an untraceable burner inbox, bypassed the two-factor authentication using a basic SIM swap vulnerability, and gained full administrative control of her profile. I didn't delete the account immediately. That would be too merciful. First, I changed her job title back to Project Liaison. Then, I systematically deleted every connection she had cultivated over the last 3 years. Every CEO, every vendor, every headhunter. I erased her entire professional safety net one click at a time. Then, I triggered a permanent account deletion request. LinkedIn gives you a grace period to cancel it. To make sure she couldn't, I set up an inbox rule on her corporate email. Any message from LinkedIn containing the word recovery, warning, or security was permanently deleted from the server before she even woke up. Her golden parachute evaporated into thin air. But a missing social profile is just an inconvenience. I needed to make her physically irrelevant in the real world. She was panicking now. I watched her through the glass walls of her stolen office, slamming her keyboard, frantically dialing IT, but she couldn't submit a support ticket. I had silently revoked her intranet privileges. She had a major quarterly damage control review scheduled for Friday. She desperately needed her presentation files to save her job. She kept everything on the shared corporate drive under a master folder named Sarah's Q3 Strategy. On Thursday night, I initiated a deep-level data wipe on that specific folder spine. I didn't just send it to the recycling bin. I used military-grade file shredding software. I overwrote the data sectors 35 times. Not even the NSA could recover those PowerPoints. When she logged in on Friday morning, 5 years of her corporate existence was simply blank space. No backups, no local copies. I even wiped her local hard drive clean through a remote patch update disguised as a routine IT security sweep. She had absolutely zero proof of her work. But the ultimate trap was already set for Monday morning. She barely survived Friday by faking a severe migraine and leaving early. She probably thought she could come in over the weekend, pull an all-nighter, and rebuild her files from scratch. She couldn't. Yes, her physical building keycard was tied directly to her Active Directory profile. At exactly 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, I executed the final command. I didn't suspend her profile. I changed her employment status in the master HR database from active to terminated, cause withheld. Our system is entirely automated. When the master status changes, the dominoes fall instantly without human intervention. The building security system revoked her access. The network disabled her VPN. The payroll system froze her direct deposit and flagged her final paycheck. She arrived at 9 a.m. on Tuesday. She swiped her badge at the main turnstile. Red light. She scoffed, wiped the card on her expensive coat, and swiped it again. Red light. She was completely locked out of the building. But the real terror wasn't the red light. It was what happened when she finally convinced a confused security guard to let her inside. She marched through the glass doors, her face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and entitlement, fully prepared to rain fire on whoever in IT had messed up her morning. She bypassed the reception desk and stormed straight onto the main floor of our open plan office. But the automated termination protocol I had triggered on Sunday night didn't just lock doors. It dispatched a work order to facilities. When Sarah reached her brand new corner office, the one she had stolen from me just weeks prior, it was completely empty. The framed degrees were in a cardboard box. The monitors were unplugged. The sleek nameplate she had specially ordered was gone from the glass door. The entire floor went dead silent. 50 people stopped typing and just stared. This was the moment I promised you at the beginning. She is Sarah standing in the middle of the office, shaking, clutching her designer bag. realizing her reality was unraveling in real time. David, our manager, stepped out of his office looking incredibly pale. He wasn't in on my plan, but the automated HR alert had hit his inbox at 6 a.m. He nervously approached her, holding a standard-issue severance packet. "Sarah," he whispered, trying to pull her into a conference room. "We need to talk. I don't know what happened, but legal sent over the termination paperwork this morning. You're not supposed to be in the building." She exploded. She screamed that it was a glitch. She demanded they check her files, her emails, her spectacular Q3 strategy presentation. She dragged David to a guest terminal and forced him to pull up her employee profile. "Look at my numbers!" she yelled, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "Look at the flagship client integration." David logged in with his manager credentials. He searched her shared drive. Empty. He checked the server backups, corrupted or missing. And the only thing remaining of her work with the flagship client was the disaster of a pitch from the previous week, the one where the CFO had torn her to shreds over a 4% variance. To David, to HR, and to the partners, the narrative was suddenly, painfully clear. Sarah had lied on her resume, botched the biggest account in the firm's history, deleted her own files in a panic to cover her tracks, and triggered a catastrophic security protocol. She was completely frantic. "Call the partners!" she demanded, tears now streaming down her face. "Check my LinkedIn. I have thousands of connections. I'm an industry leader." She pulled out her personal phone, her hands trembling so violently, she dropped it once before opening the app. She searched for her own name. User not found. I watched her eyes widen in pure, unadulterated horror. The digital safety net was gone. The files were gone. The reputation was ashes. In the eyes of the corporate machine, Sarah had essentially never existed as anything more than a catastrophic hiring error. HR escorted her out of the building 10 minutes later. She didn't look at me on her way out. She didn't have the capacity. Her mind was utterly broken by the sheer impossibility of what had just happened to her. She thought she was a master manipulator, but she had brought a knife to a drone strike. By noon, the executives were in a blind panic. The flagship client was threatening to pull their account entirely after Sarah's disastrous presentation, and the firm had absolutely no strategy moving forward because Sarah's files were completely wiped. David called an emergency all-hands meeting. He looked exhausted, terrified of losing his own job. He asked if anyone at all, had any local backups, any scrap of data that could salvage the integration. I waited exactly 10 seconds. Let the silence hang heavy in the room. Then, I calmly raised my hand. "I have the original predictive models," I said, my voice perfectly steady. "I kept offline, encrypted backups from before my father went into the hospital. I can have the accurate strategy compiled and ready for the CFO by tomorrow morning." The relief that washed over David's face was almost comical. The partners didn't ask questions about how Sarah failed. They only cared that I was holding the life raft. I delivered the presentation the next day. The numbers were flawless. The CFO signed the final integration contract on the spot. On Friday, David called me into his office. He slid a familiar piece of paper across his desk. The promotion, the 6-figure salary bump, the equity share. He didn't look me in the eye, just mumbled something about how I was right all along, and that they needed a steady, reliable hand in leadership. I took the corner office that Monday. I unpacked my things in the exact spot where Sarah had sat when she gave me that condescending little wave. HR never investigated the glitch. Why would they? Corporate systems are incredibly complex, and finding a scapegoat is always cheaper than finding the truth. As far as the firm was concerned, the system worked exactly as intended. It purged a toxic, incompetent element and rewarded the hardest worker. You might think I'm a monster. You might think that destroying someone's entire career, wiping their digital identity off the face of the earth, and gaslighting an entire executive board is crossing a moral line that can never be uncrossed. But let me ask you something. When Sarah smiled in my face, stole 3 years of my blood, sweat, and family sacrifices, and used my father's ICU admission as a stepping stone for her own greed. Did she care about moral lines? The corporate world isn't a meritocracy. It's an ecosystem. And in an ecosystem, there are only predators and prey. Sarah thought she was the apex predator because she knew how to talk. But she forgot that the person who builds the cage controls the beast. I didn't just take back what was rightfully mine. I proved that in the modern world, your title, your leverage, and your entire reality are just ones and zeros sitting on a server. And if you push the wrong person too far, they won't just beat you. They will rewrite the code so you never even played the game. In the corporate machine, you are either writing the code or you are being written out of it. There is a Sarah in every single office, someone smiling to your face while quietly plotting to stand on your shoulders, steal your credit, and leave you with nothing. The brutal truth is that playing by the rules only works when everyone else is playing the same game. But as you just saw, the people who actually survive don't just play the game, they control the board. If you've ever been stabbed in the back by a coworker, overlooked for a promotion you bled for, or watched an incompetent manipulator take the corner office, you know exactly how helpless it feels to let the system dictate your worth. But you don't have to remain the prey. Surviving this ecosystem requires more than just putting your head down and doing good work. And it requires strategy, leverage, and the ability to see the traps before they snap shut. That is exactly what we dissect here. We break down the unspoken rules of corporate warfare, the dark psychology of office manipulators, and the exact tactical frameworks you need to protect your career from being wiped out by someone else's greed. Don't wait until you're boxed out of your own achievements to learn how this machine actually operates. Hit subscribe right now to arm yourself with the leverage they will never teach you in an HR seminar. Or, if you want to see exactly how another so-called untouchable executive got systematically dismantled after trying to ruin the wrong employee, click the video on your screen right now. It proves that no matter how high up the ladder they climb, everyone leaves a back door open. Click the video, and let's find it.